Good day, everyone. In this video, you will be learning about the legal protection and genders in the national context. So, last time you were able to learn about the international frameworks, the UDHR, the CEDAW, and the SDG number 5. And from that, we can see how the global community has set strong standards for gender equality, for promoting gender equality. But those global commitments doesn't end at the international level. Each country has the responsibility to translate those principles into national laws and concrete action. So we will be learning about the Philippine laws that protects against gender discrimination. So the Philippines is actually one of the early countries that supported those international commitments to gender equality, particularly the UDHR, the CEDAW, and the SDG number 5. Our government didn't just sign those global agreements. Instead, we also translated them into national laws and policies in order to protect the rights of the women here in the Philippines and everyone else, and to promote equality in all aspects of life. So the Philippines has been an active member of the United Nations, right? So the Philippines has consistently shown its commitment to uphold human rights and gender equality on both the global and, of course, on the local levels. So we ratified CEDAW in 1981, which means we have formally agreed to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women. And then later in 2015, we also adopted the SDG number 5, particularly the gender equality as part of our national development agenda. So to make these commitments real and enforceable here in our country, we have passed several important laws that align with these international frameworks. So now let's find out about the different laws that we have. First off, we have the Magna Carta of Women. So the Magna Carta of Women, or the Republic Act 9710, was passed on August 14, 2009. It is a comprehensive human rights law that seeks to eliminate discrimination through the recognition, protection, and the fulfillment and promotion of the rights of Filipino women, especially to those who belong to the marginalized sectors of our community and our society. So it conveys a framework of rights for women based directly on the international law that we have. So the Magna Carta of Women is carried out by the Philippine Commission on Women, or the PCW. So this government agency, it makes sure that all offices, schools, institutions follow the law and include gender equality in their programs and policies. So the Magna Carta of Women is based actually, or it is rooted, grounded on our Philippine Constitution, the 1987 Constitution, especially in Article number 2, Section 14, that says the state recognizes the role of women in nation building and shall ensure the fundamental equality of women and men before the law. So, what does it mean to say? So, this means that the Constitution itself, it tells the government to protect women and give them equal rights the same way as men. So, the Magna Carta of Women, no, aside that it is rooted from our constitution, it also shows our country's commitment to CEDAW, or the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, no, one of our international frameworks against gender discrimination. So by passing this law, by passing the Magna Carta of Women, the Philippines promised to follow the goals of CEDAW and to make sure that women's rights are respected and also protected here in our country. So in short, Magna Carta of Women is a product of our constitution. It is also our international promise and our national effort to make gender equality real and lasting here in our country. So, and also, no, aside from that, this law is actually the legal backbone towards equality. So, if in the international context, no, we have CEDAW. In the Philippines, we have the Magna Carta of Women, which is one of the most important legal protection that we have when it comes to gender equality. Okay, so the Magna Carta of Women, the purpose of this law is to end all forms of discrimination against women. Aims to make sure that women are treated fairly and equally in every part of their life, no, whether it be at home, sa school, at work, in politics, and in the community as a whole. So this law, it recognizes to protect, fulfill, and promote women's rights so that every woman can live with dignity, they can live with respect and equal opportunity, the same with men. So lastly, the Magna Carta of Women encourages women to become active participants in nation building, not just as beneficiaries, but also as leaders and agents of social change and development. So, in short, this law is about giving women the freedom, the voice, and also the power to shape their own lives and help build, of course, a better society. And this law doesn't stop at equality in theory, it also recognizes that there are certain groups of women in our society. Say, for example, our indigenous women, the rural workers, solo mothers, that it recognizes their need for additional support. So this law, it also pushes for inclusive policies so that no one is left behind. All right. So here we have the definition of discrimination against women. So both Sadao and Magna Carta shares the same definition lang of discrimination. According to this law, discrimination against women is any gender-based exclusion or restriction based on sex that impairs women's rights. So for example, women getting unequal pay in the workplace, gender bias in hiring, limiting women's participation in leadership, and other things, no, that limits or that restricts women's rights and access to any opportunities. Okay, so here we also have the salient features of Magna Carta of Women. No? So these are a lot. You can just actually pause and read this part to just summarize it. Under the features of the Magna Carta of women have the rights to protection against all forms of violence, so whether it happens at home, in school, at work, or even during disaster. And it also pushes for equal treatment in the workplace so that women, particularly in the fields of military, police, which are male dominant, and in the civil service, they get the same promotions, benefits, and respect as men. And then women also get to say uh, in the decision making in families, no, sa land ownership and political participation and even sports. So even things like mga non-stereotypical media portrayals or gender-sensitive school materials and access to comprehensive healthcare from reproductive services to menopause, are they are all covered under this law. So these are the salient features of Magna Carta of Women. All right. So, of course, the this law did not exist in isolation. After it was passed, several important laws were also introduced to strengthen its impact and address the specific areas of gender inequality. So, here we have among the laws that were passed after the Magna Carta of Women was implemented. So, we have many laws here. Okay. And then it the Magna Carta of Women also covers all types of violence. So, one of the core protections under the Magna Carta of Women is the right to be protected from all types of violence, and that includes violence that could be carried out or condoned by the state itself. So, this means that the law recognizes that violence doesn't only happen in private homes or on the street, but it can also be systemic, and it may even happen in spaces that are supposed to offer protection. No, so what are those kinds of places, man? You have police stations, detention centers, or government offices. These offices or these places should offer us protection, but then again, violence can sometimes happen in these places as well. So to address this issue, the law takes several concrete steps. So it calls for more women to be hired, no, and trained in these government positions, especially in roles where they will work directly with women who've been victims of gender-based crimes. So it requires every barangay in the country to set up a violence against women desk. This is a place where women who are victims of different abuse or violence, now they can report it and get help safely and quickly when they go or when they reach out to the VAUSI in every barangay na ay VAUSI desk. Okay, and also it mandates human rights and gender sensitive training for all government employees involved in protecting women. So that way, no, they are not just enforcing the law, but they are also doing it with empathy and understanding. So we have also here, no, another proposal. This is beneficial for women. So we have the House Bill number 7758 in 2023, or the proposed Menstrual Leave Act. So under this bill, it recommends that all women, both in private and public sectors, be granted a maximum of 2 days of leave with full pay every month. So it is to manage menstrual discomfort. So countries like Japan, South Korea, and Spain already have versions of this law. So Spain became the first European country actually that provided workers with 3 days and menstrual leave, no, every month, with the option of extending it pa to 5 days. So nanay ngon ana nga law ang Spain. So I hope, no, the Philippines can also follow, because there are really girls, no, there are women who experience menstrual every month terribly, nga kana magsakit yun ang severe, no, they experience severe dysmenorrhea. All right, so kana siya. I hope the Philippines can follow also other nations. Okay. So another law here in the Philippines that we have is the RA 7877 of 1995, which is the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act. So in this law, it covers, no, when we say sexual harassment, that is the harassment that is committed by any by an employer, employee, manager, supervisor, agent of the employer, teacher, instructor, professor, coach, trainer, or any person who having authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another, or basically anyone in a position of power, in maybe it be in the work or in the school, in the education environment, demands, requests, or otherwise requires any sexual favor from the other, regardless of whether the demand, request, or requirement for submission is accepted or not by the object of said act. So this law, it protects work-related sexual harassment and school or training-related sexual harassment. So for example, if you are working, if you are an employee, if your manager or supervisor demands a sexual favor in exchange for things like getting higher pay, increased salary, or in order for you to keep your job, that is considered as a sexual harassment. Kung magdemand na ang any person who is in higher position than you in an institution demands, no, a sexual favor, that is considered as a sexual harassment. So you have to take note that even if the favor is not accepted, even if he did not accept whatever he or she was asking, the act of asking or demanding that favor from you, that is already considered harassment. All right. So aside from that, it also includes situations. So, for example, you refuse sa demand, and then you refusing the demand results in a hostile or intimidating work environment that is considered harassment already. Okay, so say for example, kamo naman, no, you are a student, so who has the moral ascendancy over you in a classroom or in the school? Of course, you have your teacher, you have your instructor, professor. If these people use their position to ask for sexual favor from you in exchange of, let's say, grades, scholarship, no, or for you to be able to pass the subject or the course, that is considered a sexual harassment. Okay, and then you have to take note that the institution, the school or the workplace, say for example, has also a responsibility in this. There is a shared responsibility that is the role of the institution. So the law does not just go after the individual offender. So dili lang siya mo go after sa teacher or sa employers and manager, supervisor, but it also holds the institutions accountable. So if the school or a company fails to act after being informed of the harassment, they can be also held liable for damages. No, that is why employers and school heads are required to do the following: to make rules and procedures for handling sexual harassment cases, to educate everyone, that is through orientations, posters, by conducting mga symposiums, pakaha. They are also kanang responsible to create a committee on decorum and investigation, or CODI. So the CODI, it handles the complaints and assures that everyone is investigated properly, that there is a fair investigation process. So they are the ones who make sure that both the victim and the accused are heard, to make sure of the credibility of the story. So dili dapat one-sided lang ang dunggon. The accused and the victim sides should be both heard. All right, to make sure that justice will be served. And the CODIN is made up of representatives from different sectors rather. For example, teachers, non-teaching staff, no, and students. So they make up the CODI, so that all sides are represented. So the main goal of this is really to create a, of course, safe learning environment for everyone, and to make sure that no one is afraid or feels afraid to speak up when harassment happens to them. So interestingly, if you look at the guidelines of the CODI, under the CODI, as much as possible, it should be headed by a woman. And the members dapat mas daghan ang women that than men in the members of CODI. That is to ensure sensitivity in handling sexual harassment cases. So, however, this is not an absolute rule, meaning dili siya required nga women gyud lang tanan ang naa, but the law and the guidelines really encourages women's representation in the committee to make sure that the process feels safe, or kanang more comfortable for the victims, especially that oftentimes it is the women who experiences harassment. All right. So when someone is found guilty, these are the penalties and legal actions they can face. And aside from these penalties and legal actions that you can see on the screen, then victims can also file for civil damages separately. Okay, but here's a very important detail. No, the case must be filed within the 3 years from the time the incident happened. Otherwise, it prescribes or ma-expire kumbaga ang case. So it is very important that when a harassment happens, please speak up. The tendency magod is that sometimes the victims feel afraid to speak up, or dili baka maulaw sila. So that is why it takes a very long time for them to finally speak up. But you have to take note that cases like this, it must be filed within 3 years from the time that the incident happened. All right. So you might ask, what if the teacher gets violated by the student? Well, the teacher will not be covered, or for example ang coach, ang supervisor will not be covered under this law, because again, if we go back no to its definition, the sexual harassment under the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act is committed by a person who has moral ascendancy over the other. So if the roles were reversed, if the power dynamic rather is reversed, it doesn't fall under the RA 787. So instead, the teachers or the manager supervisor, they can be protected by other laws. We have the revised penal code. We also have the Safe Spaces Act. No, napoy other laws that is intended for them. So in short, sexual harassment works both ways. So the law that can be used or that can be applied to this depends on who holds power in the situation. So lantawon na to ang power dynamic before we can see kung unsa nga law ato ang pwede gamiton in term when it comes to sexual harassment cases. All right? So moving on, we also have here the VAUC, the Republic Act number 9262, or the Anti-Violence Against Women and Children Act of 20042. So this is also a very important law in the Philippines. So it is a law that seeks to address the prevalence of violence against women and their children, or VAUSI, that is committed by an intimate partner, whether it may be the husband, the ex-husband, the live-in partner, the boyfriend or the girlfriend or the fiance, who the woman had sexual or dating relationship. So it was created to protect women and their children from all forms of abuse and violence, whether it happens at home, in inside the relationship, or even after separation. So kinsa man ang ginaprotektahan under ani nga law. So the VAUSI, it protects wives, former wives. It protects women in a dating or sexual relationship with the offender, girlfriend. Women who have a child with the abuser and their children, whether legitimate or not. So you have to take note that the offender can also be a same-sex partner. So, for example, lesbian girlfriend or ex. So, as long as the victim is a woman, they are protected under the VAUSI. So, sometimes you may ask nga, ma'am, is VAUSI committed by men alone? Lalaki lang ba pwede makasuhan og VAUSI, ma'am? No, no. While you have to take note that the Republic Act number 9262 is primarily designed to protect women and their children from abuse. However, women can also be held liable under this law if they are in an intimate relationship with the victim. This law na the VAUSI, this is a gender specific in terms of the victim, because again, it only protects women. So meaning dili ni magamit sa mga lalaki. If ma-abuse ang mga lalaki, they cannot use this one. But again, we have other laws that they can use. We have the revised penal code and other things. But then again, it is only women, no, who are protected under this law, because this VAUSI is a very gender specific in terms of the victim. So intended lang siya for women and their children. Okay, so I hope you got the point. So under the VAUSI, no, it recognizes four main forms of abuses. Of course, we have the physical violence, no, kanang mangulata, no, and even just placing the woman or her child in fear of imminent physical harm, that is already considered as a physical violence. Kaya di ba kung if we say physical violence, ato ang perspective lang ani is kanang sumbagon, like physically i-abuse nimo siya. However, even if you just place the women or the children in fear of imminent physical harm, that can also be considered as an abuse. So for example, nagunit kag kutsilyo, dayon you are angry, and you create a situation where the woman or her child believes that they are about to be hurt. Na even if no physical contact has occurred yet, wala nimo giluba gid sila, it still involves threatening behavior that causes the victim to reasonably fear that physical violence could happen at any moment. So it's about the mental and the emotional impact of the abuser's actions and not just the actual physical injury. Okay, then we also have sexual violence. Of course, when we talk about sexual violence, these are the acts which are sexual in nature that is committed against a woman or her child. Rape, sexual or harassment, act of lasciviousness, no, kind of mga lustful act or whatsoever thing no, that is related to sexual uh, things. Okay, sexual violence. And then we also have psychological violence or the acts or omissions causing or likely to cause mental or emotional suffering of the victim, which includes, say, for example, insulting them, humiliating them in public, stalking, gaslighting, blackmailing. So, kana siya. And then we also have economic abuse, controlling money, stopping her from work, and not giving support to the children. Kana siya that is considered as economic abuse. Is for example, you have a wife and then dili nimo siya, you don't let her go to work because you are afraid that if she makes money, she can leave you, dili siya makadepend sa imuan. Kana siya, that is considered economic abuse. An attempt to make a woman financially dependent upon her abuser. And even when you destroy household property, that's also considered economic abuse. So here in the screen, you have a more defined definition of what physical violence is, no, what can be considered as a sexual violence, a psychological violence, and economic abuse. So you can just read here for your reference. All right. So anyone who falls victim to any kind of harassment, a woman or her representative can do the following. They can file a criminal case against the abuser. They can request a protection order from the barangay or court. So we have three types of protection order, which will be discussed later on. And then we also have a penalties and sanctions that you can or the abuser may face if found guilty. So these are the penalties and sanctions. Okay, so here we have the protection orders. We have the barangay protection order, the temporary protection order, and the permanent protection order. So for the barangay protection order, it is issued by the punong barangay. So it orders the abuser to respond to immediately stop physically hurting the woman or the child or the victim. No, so ano siya, this order or this protection order lasts for 15 days. This is the fastest that the authorities can give. It serves as a initial protection at the community level without needing to go to court. So it is a preventive remedy to stop the violence immediately. All right. So however, if the abuser violates a BPO, say for example, you went to the barangay, you reported, you asked for, or you were given the barangay protection order. However, pag abot ninyo sa balay, gikulatan na po ka sa imo ang husband or sa imo live-in partner because he was angry that you went to the authorities. If that happens, if the abuser violates a BPO, they can be arrested now and they may face criminal charges for violating a protection order. So, you can have nadayon a temporary protection order. This is issued by the court immediately, usually a family court. So it can be issued on the same day the application is filed. So it must be personally served to the abuser by the court sheriff itself with the help from law enforcement, of course, if necessary. So the temporary protection order, it lasts for 3 days. So it gives protection while waiting for a full court hearing of the case. And then we also have the PPO or the Permanent Protection Order. So it is issued by the court after a hearing where both parties are already heard. So the PPO, it is a full range of protection and remedies under the law. So It keeps the abuser away, di na siya makaduol sa imuha. We can have custody arrangements na dayon, so especially if you have children, kung asa mapadulong ang bata. And also, this is where you talk about financial support, no, how can they support the child, and etc. And then the PPO, it is effective until revoked. That is why it is a permanent protection order. Okay, so who can file for a protection order? So anyone, the woman herself, it can be her parents, relatives, or mga legal guardians, no, even the social workers or mga police officers, teachers, lawyers, um, health workers, even a two concerned citizens who witness the abuse can file for a protection order. So the applications must be in writing, it must be under oath and submitted to the court or barangay. Now you have to take note that violence against women and children is a public crime. So anyone with personal knowledge of the abuse can actually file a case. That is why I said earlier ganina ko, daghan kayo pwede maka-file o protection order because VAUSI is considered a public crime. Okay, and the criminal complaint may be filed within 20 years from the occurrence or commission for the following acts. All right, so that's for the VAUSI. Now we have here the last Philippine law that we have. So for this discussion alone lang ha. So we also have other protection power, but we just focus on the most important laws. We also have the Safe Spaces Act or the Bawal Bastos Law. So this law, it covers all forms of gender-based sexual harassment that is committed in public spaces. When we say public spaces, sa mga streets, sa parks, restaurants, malls, markets, transportation hubs, sa bus ba na, sa train, sa jeepneys, PUVs, and even when you go to bars, mga clubs, spas, even in educational training institutions or workplace, and even online space. Any gender-based sexual harassment that happen in these spaces, in these places, are covered under the Safe Spaces Act or the Bawal Bastos Law. So, unsa man ang mga gender-based sexual harassment, we have the catcalling here, whistling, unwanted sexual comments, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, or transphobic slurs. We have unwanted sexual jokes or comments on appearance, persistent asking for personal info or sexual favors, groping, flushing, or public masturbation, stalking, or intimidating behavior in person or online are considered as a gender-based sexual harassment. So, you refrain from doing all these things, no, para dili mo makasuhan sa aning RA 11313. Okay, so however, we have exceptions to relevant provisions of this act. So, ang mga exception is number one, legitimate expressions of indigenous culture and tradition. So, as you all know, we have many indigenous tribes, especially here in our country. And these tribes, they have their traditional na mga tribal clothing. And sometimes their tribal clothing may include partial nudity na makita ilang mga chest, makita ilang mga legs, no, or maybe gamay ra kay matabunan sa part sa ilang body, but then again they consider it normal because that is their tribal clothing. So in case nga moadto mo sa places where indigenous people lives, no, basin ma-shock mo nga hala nga naman na siya gahubo, and then you feel nga that they are flashing their private parts, that's not considered as a sexual harassment as long as they are cultural or traditional in nature, and as long as they do not discriminate against women, against girls, and other people, as long as it does not discriminate any person, and as long as it is cultural or traditional in nature, that is not considered as sexual harassment. And also breastfeeding, no, some people are very sensitive with women who are breastfeeding in public. You have to take note that breastfeeding in any public or private space is not considered a sexual act or harassment. So it is protected and encouraged under the various laws. So we have laws about expanded breastfeeding promotion act no of 2009. So basin mo kung hala nagpakita siya sa iyang breast. Well, in fact nga nagpa-breastfeed lang siya diha sa iyang baby. That's not sexual or that's not a gender-based sexual harassment. That's not pambabastos. Okay? So you have to take note that confidentiality is very important. It must be upheld in this kind of situation. So all parties must ensure that the information related to complaints of gender-based sexual harassment is kept private. It should not be disclosed to anyone who is not directly involved. So if na mga cases like this, these are not a information himuong tea. No, what's the tea? Himuong chismis. Confidentiality must be upheld in this kind of cases. No, it should be handled sensitively, especially to protect the dignity of the victim and also of the other party. If the sexual harassment is caused by a minor, both the victims and the minor's rights must also be respected throughout the investigation, the prosecution, and the court proceedings. And here I have attached a picture. So these are the penalties that you can get if ever you witness or experience rather this kind of pambabastos in public. So you can just zoom in on the picture. Okay. That's for the Safe Spaces Act or the Bawal Bastos Law. Now, it is really important to understand the laws and rights that surrounds gender-based issues because we can use it and it can really affect our everyday lives, no? Because if you know your right, you are also more likely to stand up for yourself or maybe help someone you know who experience or who is being treated unfairly. So ano siya, it's very important that you know your rights, that you know how you can be protected from all sort of discrimination, of harassment, and sexual violence. All right, so thank you so much. I hope you have learned something from the discussion.